All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to, we're going to look at some pretty extraordinary claims.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from Catherine Griggs.
Okay.
In a recording called, and get this, Army Wife Tells All, .makingofpizzagate.mp3.
Wow, that's quite a title.
It is.
Yeah.
And she alleges that she learned all about this, this vast conspiracy
Okay.
within the U.S. military and the and intelligence communities, no less,
Mm-hmm.
from her husband,
Her husband.
Colonel George Griggs.
So she was married to a high-ranking military official, and she's claiming he spilled the beans on some massive conspiracy. That's a pretty bold claim. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a spy thriller, doesn't it?
It does. But we are here to, to break it down.
Yeah.
Separate fact from fiction.
I'm all for that. Always good to have a healthy dose of skepticism when dealing with, with claims like these.
Yeah.
Especially when they involve, powerful institutions and the potential for hidden agendas.
Exactly. And to help us do that, we've got our expert here.
Well, I think it's important to remember that, we're dealing with a single source here, right? Just Catherine Griggs. And her account, well, it's uncorroborated.
That's true.
So our deep dive, it's even more important, don't you think? To really examine her claims, put them under the microscope, see how they hold up.
Absolutely. So to set the stage for our listeners who may not be familiar with the story,
Yeah.
who exactly are Catherine and George Griggs, and how did she supposedly gain access to all this top secret information?
All right, so Catherine Griggs, she claims she was married to Colonel George Griggs for 11 years.
Okay.
And according to her, he was head of special operations under Admiral Kelso of NATO.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a pretty high-ranking position.
Oh, it is high up.
And Catherine herself, she was involved in the NATO Wives Club, so that's how she claims she got access to, these circles, these high-level gatherings.
So through these social circles.
Right, exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. Catherine alleges that George, fueled by alcohol, would reveal classified information about the intelligence community, kind of like a need to unburden himself, And she became, the accidental keeper of these secrets.
Okay, so her story hinges on these late-night alcohol-fueled confessions.
Basically, yeah.
Now, before we get too deep into the specifics of Catherine's claims, can you tell us a bit about Pizzagate?
Oh, sure, yeah. So Pizzagate, it's a debunked conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Surfaced during the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Right.
And it claimed, falsely, that high-ranking Democratic Party officials were involved in a child sex trafficking ring.
What?
Yeah, centered around a pizza restaurant in Washington, D.C.
No way.
Yeah. This theory, it spread like wildfire online, fueled by, misinformation, a lot of inflammatory rhetoric, and it had real-world consequences.
Really?
Yeah, even led to an armed attack on the restaurant, actually.
It's incredible how a baseless conspiracy theory can have such a tangible impact on the real world, real people. Scary.
Absolutely. It highlights the dangers of misinformation and how quickly it can escalate and have real-world consequences.
Okay, so back to Catherine Griggs. What are some of the key claims she's making about the military? What does she believe is going on behind those closed doors?
Well, her claims are pretty, they're pretty wide-ranging and, to be honest, disturbing. One of her most, explosive allegations is that the U.S. military, and this is a direct quote, is run by sexual deviants.
Wow. That's a strong statement.
Particularly, she claims, targeting homosexuals.
Okay.
She says they're sought out for intelligence work because they're perceived as, vulnerable to blackmail and control.
That's a heavy accusation to make. And it seems to play into some pretty harmful stereotypes about homosexuality, doesn't it?
That's
like about their trustworthiness.
Absolutely. It's important to recognize that that claim for what it is, a harmful generalization.
Right.
I mean, sexual orientation has absolutely no bearing on someone's vulnerability to blackmail or their ability to hold positions of power. It's simply not true.
Yeah, it's a dangerous stereotype that's been used to marginalize and discriminate against people for far too long.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, conspiracy theories can be used to demonize certain groups, and this is a prime example of that.
So right off the bat, we're seeing a blend of sharking allegations, problematic stereotypes. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it really is. And it highlights the importance of, approaching these claims with a critical eye and being mindful of the potential for bias and prejudice.
Definitely. So what other activities did Catherine Griggs allege the military was involved in?
Okay, so Catherine's allegations, they went beyond, that sexual deviancy claim. She describes a system where the military, they identify promising young men from, influential families, and they turn them.
Turn them. What does she mean by turn them?
Well, essentially, they turn them into loyal members of this alleged cabal.
Okay, so this is starting to sound like a spy novel or something. Did she mention any specific individuals that were supposedly part of this system? Names?
She did. She named Bill Clinton and Ehud Barak.
Wow, those are some big names.
Right. And she claimed they were products of this turning process. But I want to emphasize that, these are serious accusations without any supporting evidence.
Of course.
And it's also worth noting that this was during the 1990s, a time when conspiracy theories targeting Bill Clinton they were rampant.
Right.
Often fueled by political motivations.
So it's interesting how she weaves her narrative around figures who were already subject to public scrutiny, making her story seem more plausible.
It's a clever tactic, it taps into existing suspicions and beliefs about these figures.
Yeah, and it plays on those pre-existing narratives. But her claims didn't stop there, did they? What else did she say?
Well, she also claimed the military was heavily involved in drug trafficking and money laundering.
Really? Drugs?
Money laundering.
Yeah. She said she knew about drug routes, specific schemes, even named people she believed were complicit.
Wow, it's a pretty potent mix of accusations, especially for those who might be predisposed to distrust authority or to believe in hidden agendas. Did she provide any specifics to back up these claims about drug trafficking?
She mentioned General Barry McCaffrey, claimed he admitted to the military's role in controlling the flow of drugs. Now, General McCaffrey, he was indeed the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy under President Clinton. Okay.
However, there's no record of him ever admitting to such a thing.
Interesting.
It seems to align with with common conspiracy theories about, government agencies being complicit in the drug trade.
Right. That's a narrative that's been around for decades.
Exactly. And it plays on that that deep-seated distrust of government and the idea that, they're not always what they seem.
Yeah, it's a powerful narrative. So she's taking a pre-existing narrative and then inserting herself into it.
Exactly, like a character in the story. It's a way to bolster her her credibility without actually providing any concrete proof.
It's a clever tactic,
Yeah.
but her claims, they take an even darker turn, don't they? What else?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Catherine alleged that the U.S. military was developing and deploying biological and chemical weapons.
Whoa, hold on. Biological and chemical weapons, that's a whole other level.
Yeah.
Did she tie this to any specific events or, offer any motives for why they would be doing this?
Not explicitly, but her account, it paints a picture of a military operating outside the bounds of morality, willing to use, deadly weapons for their own purposes. It plays on that fear of government overreach and the potential for science to be used for destructive ends, a theme that resonates with a lot of conspiracy theories, actually.
Okay, we've got manipulation, drug trafficking, and now biological weapons. It's starting to feel like she's accusing the military of every nefarious act imaginable. Is there anything else?
She also describes this club.
A club? What's that?
It's supposedly an exclusive group within the military where high-ranking officials participate in rituals.
Rituals? Like what kind of rituals?
She says they involve alcohol and sexual acts.
Wait, what? Sexual acts? As part of a military ritual?
That's what she claims. She says it's a form of initiation and control.
This is getting more and more bizarre. Did she give any details about these supposed rituals? What were they like? What did they do?
She uses terms like dining in and shellback.
Dining in. I'm familiar with that. It's a traditional formal dinner for military units, a way to build camaraderie.
Right, exactly. But she claims those terms are, code words for these illicit activities.
So she's taking a normal military tradition and twisting it to fit her narrative.
It seems that way, yeah. It's a common tactic in conspiracy theories. They take existing institutions or practices and reframe them to fit their narrative.
She's taking something familiar and adding a sinister spin to it.
Yeah.
Clever. But as you said, we need to approach this with a critical eye. It's easy to get caught up in the story. Did she mention anything about how this club maintains its secrecy? Are there consequences for those who dare to speak out?
She believed that military wives who knew too much, like herself, were considered threats.
And targeted.
Like how she shared a story about a colonel's secretary who supposedly uncovered money laundering activities and was pushed out of a window.
Pushed out of a window. That's terrifying.
Right. And according to Catherine, whistleblowers, they face similar dangers.
So it's the classic conspiracy theory trope: silence anyone who threatens the powerful.
Yeah.
It adds that element of personal danger to her story,
Mm-hmm.
making her seem like a brave truth teller.
It's a powerful narrative technique that can really draw listeners in.
It certainly does.
Right.
Okay, so we've got Catherine's claims: manipulation, drug trafficking, biological weapons, and this club pulling the strings. It's quite the story. How do we even begin to make sense of all of this?
Well, the first thing to remember is that Catherine's account is entirely anecdotal. We're relying solely on her word, and it's crucial to be aware of potential biases, exaggerations, or even, outright fabrication.
So we can't just accept her story at face value. What are some inconsistencies or red flags that stand out to you?
Well, her claim that the military is run by homosexuals, specifically recruited for their supposed vulnerability to blackmail, it's discriminatory and logically flawed. There's absolutely no evidence to support this, and it reflects harmful prejudices.
Yeah, that's definitely a major red flag. It reminds us to be critical of information, especially when it involves sensitive topics like this. What other inconsistencies did you notice?
She relies heavily on, vague terms and generalization. She talks about this club and its rituals, but provides very few, concrete details. She names Bill Clinton and Ehud Barak, but offers no evidence for their alleged involvement.
So there's a lack of specifics and a lot of, broad accusations. It's like she's building a framework of suspicion without providing the building blocks of evidence.
You got it. It's a common tactic in conspiracy theories: make sweeping statements but avoid concrete details that can be, fact-checked. It's about creating an atmosphere of distrust rather than building a solid case.
I'm curious about Catherine's motivations. Why would she come forward with these accusations?
That's a great question. It's possible she believes everything she's saying. She might have misinterpreted her husband's, drunken ramblings and filled in the gaps with her own beliefs. It's also possible that she harbors, resentment towards the military, maybe due to a negative personal experience.
So it could be a mix of misinterpretation, personal bias, or even a desire for attention.
Exactly. We can't dismiss her claims outright, but we need to apply a healthy dose of skepticism. Critically analyzing conspiracy theories requires finding that balance between, open-mindedness and critical thinking.
Right. It's like walking a tightrope, trying to be objective while acknowledging the weight of her accusations. But as you've pointed out, the lack of evidence and the reliance on stereotypes makes it difficult to take her claims at face value. Where do we go from here? What other angles should we explore to get a better understanding of this story?
Well, one important avenue is to examine how Catherine's narrative echoes other conspiracy theories. Her claims about secret societies, powerful cabals, manipulation, they tap into a familiar framework.
You're right. It's almost like she's drawing from a pre-existing template.
Yeah.
Tapping into a narrative that already resonates with a certain audience.
Exactly. And that's something we'll delve into deeper after a short break. We'll explore, common themes in conspiracy theories and discuss why they can be so compelling, even in the absence of concrete evidence.
Okay, so we've established that Catherine Griggs' account has some holes and inconsistencies. But you mentioned that her narrative echoes other conspiracy theories. Can you expand on that a bit? What are some common threads that run through these types of stories?
Well, conspiracy theories, they often thrive on this idea of hidden knowledge, right? Secret societies, controlling world events, it's all happening behind the curtain, and they offer a sense of order. in a chaotic world, right? When it
Right.
makes people feel like they're in the know,
Mhm.
privy to information that most people aren't. It's empowering in a way.
Right. Like you've cracked the secret code or something.
Exactly. You feel like you've unlocked a deeper truth,
Yeah.
that others are oblivious to. But as we've seen with Catherine's claims, these truths, they often lack, they lack evidence.
They do. So how do these theories manage to persist despite that? How do they keep going?
Well, they often tap into pre-existing anxieties, societal fears.
Okay.
For instance, Catherine's claims about drug trafficking, they play on that distrust of government, the idea of hidden agendas.
Right. Right.
And these fears, they're not unfounded,
Mhm.
There have been real instances of government corruption. But conspiracy theories, they take those isolated incidents and they extrapolate them into grand narratives of systemic evil.
So they take a kernel of truth, a valid concern, and then they blow it out of proportion.
Exactly. They turn a spark into a wildfire. And once that fire is lit, it's difficult to put out. And social media, it's become a breeding ground for these theories. It allows them to spread, quickly and widely.
Right. So it's the perfect storm, isn't it? A compelling story tapping into existing fears, amplified by the echo chamber of social media. No wonder these narratives are so difficult to debunk.
And let's not forget the emotional appeal. Conspiracy theories, they often present individuals like Catherine Griggs as brave truth tellers, risking everything to expose the hidden machinations of the powerful.
Right.
It taps into our natural inclination to root for the underdog. That David versus Goliath narrative.
It makes the listener feel like they're part of a select group.
Right.
Fighting against injustice, uncovering the truth. It's almost like joining a secret society of your own.
Right. It creates a sense of, camaraderie, shared purpose.
Yeah.
But that sense of belonging, it can also lead to a dangerous us versus them mentality,
Right.
where anyone who questions the narrative, they're labeled an enemy, a sheeple,
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
a slippery slope, and it really highlights the dangers of these theories. They can divide communities, erode trust in institutions, and even lead to real-world violence. We saw that with Pizzagate.
We did. It's a stark reminder that words have power,
Yeah.
and that these baseless theories can have very real and often devastating consequences.
Absolutely, and it underscores the need for, critical thinking,
Yeah.
checking sources,
Mm-hmm.
being wary of narratives that just confirm our existing biases.
Right. Right. Okay, let's get back to some of the specific claims made by Catherine Griggs. Her allegations about drug trafficking and money laundering, those are particularly intriguing. As you mentioned earlier, these types of claims, they've been circulating for decades. Why? Why do they persist? And is there any truth to them?
Well, conspiracy theories about, government agencies being involved in the drug trade, they tap into this deep-seated distrust of authority, that belief that those in power, they're operating above the law.
Hmm.
And this distrust, it's not entirely unfounded. I mean,
Yeah.
there have been instances of corruption within various government agencies, including the military. But these isolated cases, they're often, they're extrapolated into grand narratives of widespread conspiracy.
So it's about recognizing the difference between isolated incidents and a systemic issue. One bad apple doesn't necessarily spoil the whole bunch, but
Yeah.
it can certainly raise questions about accountability.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that, proving negative it's incredibly difficult. Just because there isn't conclusive evidence to prove the military is not involved in drug trafficking doesn't mean it's true.
Right. Right.
The burden of proof, it lies with the person making the claim. And in this case, Catherine Griggs, she doesn't offer any concrete evidence beyond her husband's alleged confessions.
Right. It's like trying to prove you've never been to the moon. You can offer all sorts of arguments and explanations, but ultimately the lack of evidence, doesn't actually prove anything.
Exactly. And I think it's important to be wary of falling into that trap of believing something simply because it hasn't been disproven. That's not how critical thinking works.
Right. Right.
We need to evaluate claims based on the evidence presented, not on the absence of evidence.
Okay, so we need to approach these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. But what about her allegations about uh, about biological and chemical weapons production. Those are pretty serious accusations. How
Right.
should we think about those, in light of her other claims?
Well, as we've discussed, Catherine's narrative, it has a tendency to snowball.
Mm-hmm.
She starts with one shocking claim, and then it seems to escalate from there.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that the production and use of biological and chemical weapons they're strictly prohibited under international law.
Right.
If there were credible evidence to support Catherine's allegations, it would be a major international scandal.
So the stakes are incredibly high. We can't just, casually toss around accusations like that without considering the potential consequences.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that developing and deploying biological and chemical weapons they're incredibly complex endeavors,
Mm-hmm.
and expensive. It's highly unlikely that such activities could be carried out in complete secrecy, without leaving any trace.
It's like trying to hide a parade in a phone booth. It just wouldn't be possible.
Precisely. And I think it's important to remember Occam's razor,
Mm-hmm.
which suggests that the simplest explanation is usually the most likely. And in this case, the simplest explanation is that Catherine Griggs's claims they're based on misinterpretations, personal biases, and perhaps even a desire for attention or a sense of importance.
So are we saying that we should just dismiss her entire story? Just toss it out?
Not necessarily. I think it's important to acknowledge that human motivations they're complex.
Okay.
It's possible that Catherine genuinely believes what she's saying,
Mm-hmm.
but belief doesn't equate to truth.
Right.
We need to evaluate her claims based on the evidence or lack thereof, and in this case, the evidence is it's simply not there to support her allegations.
Okay, so we're left with a story that's compelling, but ultimately unverifiable. It's a reminder that even the most captivating narratives can be built on a foundation of sand.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a cautionary tale about the importance of critical thinking and the dangers of accepting information at face value.
But I think there's still a lot to learn from Catherine Griggs's story, even if we don't take her claims at face value.
I agree. I think her story, it highlights the importance of, critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
the need for media literacy, the dangers of misinformation, especially in the age of social media.
Right. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to be discerning consumers of information, to question what we hear and read, and to seek out diverse perspectives.
Exactly. We can't just passively absorb information, especially when it comes to, sensationalized claims or conspiracy theories. We need to engage our critical thinking skills, evaluate sources, be aware of our own biases.
It's about being an active participant in the search for truth rather than a passive recipient of whatever narrative is being presented to us.
Well said. And I think that's that's a skill that's more important than ever in today's world, where we're bombarded with information from all directions.
Yeah.
We need to be able to filter out the noise, identify credible sources.
Right. We're all susceptible to confirmation bias, to seeking out information that confirms our existing beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to get closer to the truth, we need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And to consider alternative viewpoints.
Absolutely. And I think Catherine Griggs's story, despite its flaws, it can serve as a valuable case study in how conspiracy theories can take root and spread, and how they can exploit our vulnerabilities and anxieties.
Okay, so we've explored the content of Catherine Griggs's claims, their inconsistencies, their relationship to broader conspiracy theories, and the implications for women within the military. What are some key takeaways for our listeners as they continue to process this information?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is the importance of critical thinking, right? We need to be skeptical of information, especially when it comes from unverified sources or plays into our existing biases.
Right. It's about asking questions, seeking out diverse perspectives, and being willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that the truth is often, elusive. It rarely fits neatly into our preconceived notions, and that the journey of discovery it's often more rewarding than the destination.
Well said. And I think Catherine Griggs' story, despite its flaws, serves as a valuable lesson in how to navigate the increasingly complex and challenging information landscape.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to be informed, engaged, and critical citizens.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the pursuit of truth is an ongoing process, one that requires humility, open-mindedness, and a commitment to evidence-based reasoning.
It's a journey that we're all on together, and it's a journey worth taking.
Well said. Now, let's shift our focus to Catherine's chilling accusations that the U.S. military develops and deploys biological and chemical weapons.
This is a serious claim, and one that taps into a deep-seated fear of both government overreach and the potential for devastating consequences.
It's important to reiterate that the production and use of biological and chemical weapons they're strictly prohibited under international law. Any credible evidence supporting these claims would be a major international incident with far-reaching consequences.
So we're talking about something that would have, global implications. The stakes are incredibly high. Did Catherine offer any concrete evidence to substantiate this claim?
She shared a story about a lieutenant colonel named Randy Aber, who, according to her, led a platoon in Iraq and was exposed to American-made chemical weapons. Catherine also mentions a Marine colonel named Peter Kawaja, who she alleges worked in a factory producing these weapons.
That level of detail, it does make it feel more believable.
You're absolutely right. It can be easy to get caught up in a story when it's told with such specifics. However, despite these details, it's essential to remember that we are still dealing with uncorroborated claims from a single source.
So how do we reconcile those seemingly plausible details with the fact that there's no concrete evidence to support the claim as a whole?
This is a common tactic used in conspiracy theories to lend credibility to an otherwise unsubstantiated claim.
Okay.
By adding specific names and locations, it creates this veneer of authenticity, making it more believable for those already inclined towards distrust or suspicion. Think of it like this. If someone told you they had a pet unicorn, you'd likely be very skeptical.
I would have.
But if they then added details like his name is Sparkles and he loves eating marshmallows, it might make you pause, even for a moment, because those details they create an image in your mind. However, those details they don't make the unicorn real.
That's a really great analogy. It shows how easily we can be swayed by seemingly convincing details, even when the core claim is outlandish. But as you pointed out, the lack of evidence, that's a major red flag.
Exactly. And when we're talking about something as serious as the production and use of weapons of mass destruction, the bar for evidence, it needs to be exceptionally high. It's not enough to simply suggest it's possible. We need concrete, verifiable proof.
Okay, so we need to apply an extra layer of skepticism when dealing with claims of this magnitude. But what about Catherine's story about the colonel's secretary who was allegedly pushed out of a window after uncovering money laundering activities? That's pretty chilling detail, and it feeds into her narrative of a military that's willing to silence those who threaten its secrets.
You're absolutely right. That detail does add a layer of intrigue and danger to the story, and it's important to acknowledge that the military, like any large organization, isn't immune to corruption or wrongdoing. However, it's crucial to remember that anecdotal evidence it's not the same as concrete proof.
So while her story it might resonate with some listeners who are already distrustful of authority, it's not sufficient to conclude that the military is engaged in a widespread cover-up.
Precisely, and I think it's important to be wary of falling into the trap of believing something simply because it fits into our pre-existing beliefs about the world.
So we're back to the importance of critical thinking, of questioning our assumptions, and of seeking out evidence-based perspectives.
Exactly. It's about being open-minded, but not empty-headed. You know, we need to be willing to consider all possibilities, but we also need to demand evidence and to be skeptical of claims that lack supporting data or that rely on hearsay and conjecture.
Okay, I think we've done a pretty thorough job of unpacking Catherine Griggs' claims and exploring the broader context of conspiracy theories. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
The psychological appeal of these types of narratives. Why are they so compelling even when they lack evidence?
Conspiracy theories, they often, they offer a sense of order in a world that can feel, chaotic and unpredictable.
Okay.
They provide a framework for understanding complex events, even if that framework is based on flawed logic or unverified information.
It's like finding a hidden pattern in a random sequence of numbers. Suddenly, it feels like there's a deeper meaning, a secret code that only a select few can decipher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that sense of empowerment can be addictive,
Yeah.
leading people down a rabbit hole of ever more elaborate and outlandish theories.
It's like a drug,
Mhm.
providing a temporary high of certainty and control in a world that often feels uncertain and uncontrollable.
Precisely, and I think it's important to be aware of this psychological dynamic.
Yeah.
Both in ourselves and in others. We're all susceptible to the allure of simple explanations, especially when they confirm our existing biases or fears.
Mm.
But the truth is often far more complex and nuanced than any conspiracy theory can capture.
So how do we resist the allure of these seductive narratives? How do we develop a healthy skepticism without becoming cynical or closed-minded?
I think it starts with cultivating a curious but critical mindset.
Yeah. Mhm.
We need to be willing to ask questions, to seek out diverse perspectives, and to be comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. We also need to be aware of our own biases, to understand how they can influence our thinking, and to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
It's about recognizing that we're all fallible. We all make mistakes,
Yeah.
and that the pursuit of truth is a lifelong journey, not a destination.
Well said, and I think it's a journey that's worth taking, even if it's challenging and sometimes uncomfortable. The search for truth, for understanding, is it's what drives us forward, both individually and as a society.
It's what makes us human.
Now, before we completely wrap up this deep dive into Catherine Griggs's claims, I want to highlight an aspect of this story that often gets overlooked in discussions of conspiracy theories. Catherine describes a moment where she's on a boat with high-ranking military personnel, including admirals and generals. She alleges that during this trip, she witnessed rituals and behaviors that were, well, deeply disturbing, and that cemented her belief in this secretive club operating within the military.
This incident on the boat, it seems to be a turning point in her story.
Mm-hmm.
The moment where her suspicions solidified into firm belief. Can you elaborate on what she claims happened?
Catherine describes a scene where these high-ranking officials were engaged in heavy drinking and what she perceived as, sexually suggestive behavior. She uses the term shellback, which she claims was a a code word for a ritualistic hazing process involving alcohol and sexual acts. She even alleges that chaplains were present,
Yeah.
not to offer spiritual guidance, but to gather information on the participants.
That's a pretty disturbing image, and it feeds into her narrative of a corrupt and morally compromised elite operating with impunity. But as we've discussed, we need to be cautious about accepting anecdotal evidence without corroboration. Is there any truth to the term shellback as she describes it?
The term shellback, it does have a legitimate meaning within naval tradition. It refers to a sailor who has crossed the equator for the first time. There's often a lighthearted ceremony involved, but nothing remotely resembling the sinister rituals Catherine describes.
So she's again taking a real tradition and twisting it to fit her narrative.
Mm.
It's a clever way to make her claims seem more believable to those who aren't familiar with the actual practice.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the larger picture here. What does this incident on the boat, regardless of its veracity, tell us about the psychology of belief and the way conspiracy theories take root?
This episode, it highlights the power of confirmation bias. It
No.
seems that Catherine was already predisposed to distrust the military, and this incident on the boat, filtered through her existing suspicions, became the confirmation she needed to solidify her belief in a grand conspiracy.
So even if the events she witnessed were relatively innocuous, her interpretation of those events was colored by her pre-existing beliefs.
Exactly, and I think this is a crucial point to remember when evaluating any claim,
Yeah.
especially those that align with our existing worldview. You know, we need to be aware of how our biases can influence our perception and interpretation of information.
It's a reminder that critical thinking isn't just about evaluating external sources.
Mhm.
It's also about examining our own internal biases and filters.
Right. We need to ask ourselves, am I interpreting this information objectively, or am I letting my pre-existing beliefs shape my understanding?
Okay, so we've talked about Catherine Griggs's claims, their inconsistencies, their relationship to broader conspiracy theories, and the psychological factors that might have influenced her beliefs. But I think there's one more aspect of her story that's worth exploring. The role of trauma and the ways in which it can shape our perception of the world.
That's an important point, and it's something we need to approach with sensitivity. Catherine's account, it's filled with vivid descriptions of alleged abuse, manipulation, and even violence. This raises questions about the nature of trauma and the ways in which it can impact our memories and our sense of reality.
It's a complex topic, but one that's relevant to our discussion. Trauma can have profound and lasting effects on individuals, influencing their behavior and shaping their worldview in ways that may not always be apparent.
Exactly, and it's important to remember that that trauma is subjective. What might seem like a minor incident to one person could be deeply traumatizing to another,
Right.
depending on their individual experiences and vulnerabilities.
So it's not about judging the validity of someone's trauma, but rather about understanding how it might have shaped their perceptions and beliefs.
Precisely, and I think it's important to approach Catherine Griggs' story with empathy and compassion, while also maintaining our commitment to critical thinking and evidence-based analysis. We can acknowledge the possibility that she's been deeply affected by traumatic experiences without necessarily, endorsing her claims or accepting them as factual.
It's a delicate balance, but an important one to strike. We need to be both compassionate and discerning, recognizing the human element while also staying grounded in reason and evidence.
Well said. And I think it's a reminder that we're all complex beings shaped by a multitude of experiences, both positive and negative. And those experiences, they inform our beliefs, our values, and our perceptions of the world.
So are you suggesting that Catherine Griggs' claims might be a manifestation of her own trauma, a way of making sense of a world that feels chaotic and unsafe?
It's certainly a possibility. Trauma can distort our perceptions and memories.
Leading us to see patterns where none exist, or to misinterpret events in ways that confirm our fears and anxieties.
It's like looking through a cracked lens. The image we see might be distorted, but it feels real to us.
Exactly. And I think it's important to be aware of this potential for distortion, both in ourselves and in others. When we encounter claims that seem outlandish or difficult to believe, it's worth considering the possibility that trauma might be playing a role.
So are you suggesting that we should give Catherine Griggs a pass because she might be traumatized?
Not at all. I think it's important to hold people accountable for their actions and their words. But I also think it's important to understand the context in which those actions and words are spoken. Trauma can be a powerful force, and it can lead people to behave in ways that they might not otherwise. So it's about recognizing the humanity behind the claims, the complex web of experiences that might have led someone to believe in a particular narrative.
Exactly. And it's about approaching these situations with a sense of compassion and understanding while also maintaining our commitment to truth and accountability.
I think that's a valuable perspective to keep in mind as we continue to grapple with Katharine Griggs' story and the broader phenomenon of conspiracy theories. It's a reminder that we're all complex beings shaped by a multitude of experiences, both positive and negative.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to approach these discussions with a sense of humility, recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and that there's always more to learn.
Well said. Now let's shift gears a bit and explore one of the recurring themes in Katharine Griggs' account, the idea of control. She repeatedly emphasizes the ways in which the alleged club seeks to control its members through blackmail, manipulation, and even violence. This raises broader questions about the nature. It's like it almost feels like we as humans we're drawn to those simple explanations, you know, those clear narratives of good versus evil.
Oh, absolutely. You've hit on a key point there. Our brains, they're wired for patterns. They crave narratives.
Right.
We're constantly trying to make sense of the world around us, connect the dots, build a story, a narrative.
Yeah.
And when we come across information that kind of shakes things up, you know, it challenges our understanding or creates that feeling of dissonance, it can be really tempting to grab onto a simple explanation, even if it's not entirely accurate.
It is tempting. But as we've seen with Katharine Griggs, sometimes those simplistic explanations, they can lead us down a pretty dangerous path.
No doubt about it. The truth is, reality is messy. It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's full of contradictions, you know?
Yeah.
There are rarely clear-cut answers,
You know,
easy solutions. You know what I mean?
I do. So how do we navigate that, you know, that complex landscape? How do we cultivate that healthy skepticism, that critical eye without becoming cynical or closing ourselves off to new information?
It's a tightrope walk for sure. But I think it starts with humility.
Humility.
Yeah, intellectual humility.
Right.
Recognizing that, we don't have all the answers. Our understanding, it's always evolving, right?
Right.
We're all prone to biases, you know, and errors in judgment.
We are. So being open to the possibility that we could be wrong.
Exactly. That our beliefs, they might need tweaking, you know, as new information comes to light, or we encounter new perspectives.
Okay, so intellectual humility is key.
Yeah.
But are there any practical steps, you know, any questions we should be asking ourselves when we come across new information?
Of course, yeah. Especially when it's, you know, a claim that seems a bit out there, a bit controversial.
Right.
First and foremost, look at the source.
The source, okay.
Who's making the claim? What's their background, their credentials? What might their biases be, their motivations?
Right. We need to be wary of those anonymous sources or those who have a vested interest in pushing a particular agenda.
Absolutely. And then look at the evidence itself.
The evidence.
What's being presented? Is it anecdotal? Is it empirical, you know, based on data? Is there corroboration from other sources?
Right. So it's about looking for those concrete facts, that verifiable data, not just relying on hearsay or personal stories.
Exactly. And don't just stay in your own lane, you know?
What do you mean?
Seek out different perspectives.
Okay.
Don't just stick to information that backs up what you already believe.
Yep.
Challenge yourself. Consider alternative viewpoints, even if they make you a bit uncomfortable.
It's about stepping outside of our echo chambers, you know, those comfortable spaces where everyone agrees with us.
Exactly. And be wary of the emotional stuff, you know?
Okay, what do you mean?
Conspiracy theories, they often play on our fears, our anxieties, our desire for simple answers. It's powerful stuff.
It is. They offer that sense of control, of certainty in a world that often feels very uncertain, very uncontrollable. But as we've seen with Catherine Griggs's story, that sense of control, well, it can be an illusion, and it can lead us further away from the truth.
That's right. So when you encounter information and it triggers that strong emotional response in you, take a step back. Ask yourself, am I reacting to the facts here, or am I being swayed by those emotional appeals?
So it's about engaging our rational minds,
Yes.
not just letting our emotions run the show.
Precisely. And remember, the burden of proof, it lies with the person making the claim. It's not on others to disprove it.
Right.
It's on the claimant to provide the evidence
Yeah.
to back it up.
So if someone claims that the Earth is flat, it's not on us to prove them wrong. It's on them to provide the evidence that supports their claim.
Exactly. And that's a crucial point, especially when we're dealing with these extraordinary claims, these big ideas.
Okay, so we've talked about intellectual humility, evaluating sources, assessing the evidence, seeking out those diverse perspectives, recognizing when there's emotional manipulation at play. Any other tips for navigating this world of information?
Be aware of your own limitations. You know what you don't know. We all have blind spots, areas where our understanding is incomplete or maybe even a bit off.
Right. So acknowledging that we don't have all the answers.
Yeah. And that there's always more to learn.
Right. So approaching new information with that sense of curiosity, that openness.
Exactly. Not getting defensive, not being rigid.
So it's about embracing that journey of lifelong learning, constantly expanding our understanding of the world around us.
Well said. And I think Catherine Griggs's story, despite its flaws, its inconsistencies, it serves as a valuable reminder, a reminder of the importance of critical thinking, the need for that intellectual humility we talked about, and the power of belief, even when that belief is, well, misguided.
It's a reminder that we all have that responsibility to be discerning, to be critical of what we hear and read, and to engage in those conversations.
Absolutely. Even when we disagree.
Yes, even when we disagree, respectfully, of course.
Of course, with respect. Always.
But I think it's also a reminder that behind every conspiracy theory, there's a human being, a person who's searching for answers, for meaning, for a sense of control in a world that can feel pretty chaotic and unpredictable at times.
Well said. It's a reminder to be vigilant, to be critical, and to engage in that respectful dialogue. But you're right, behind every theory, there's a human story.
And I think our listeners, they get that. They're right there with us, grappling with these complex ideas, wrestling with those uncomfortable truths that Catherine Griggs' story brings to light. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, to question what you hear, and to always seek out those evidence-based perspectives. Remember, critical thinking, it's a muscle. It needs to be exercised. We'll be back next week with another deep dive. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep searching for the truth.
It's been a pleasure. I've been a